Good afternoon, good Friday afternoon, and welcome everyone to our weekly webinar on guidance for small businesses in this time of the coronavirus. Today, we will have a brief update on all COVID-19 relief programs. And in addition to that, we will have a special panelist presenting the topic, Add Value or Die. But before we talk about the content of the webinar, let me spend just a minute sharing with you information on logistics for this webinar. We're using Zoom as our portal, and many of you are quite familiar with Zoom now that we're all working from home. But I'll just quickly go over a couple things. For the purposes of this webinar, you should see a Q&A button near the center of your screen. We're encouraging you all that if you have questions during the webinar to type your question in using that Q&A tab. We will answer some questions throughout the webinar, and that will be via the webinar Q&A answer portal. But all questions will be answered after, and we will send those to you. We're going to do about a half an hour of the presentation. We'll open it up for questions for about a half an hour. And during that half an hour Q&A period, we will field the questions that you've typed into the Q&A bar. We will attempt to answer all. Our experience has been that we don't get all questions answered during that time. So we will follow on and answer questions afterwards and send you a transcript of those questions. So let's go ahead and move forward to today's topic. We have an awful lot to share. So I'm going to first introduce our panelists that you're very familiar with, and that is Steve Denny and Terry Lammers, the co-founders and managing members of Innovative Business Advisors. Steve, as in the past, will present the update on the COVID-19 programs aimed to help small business, and Terry will be available for answering questions throughout while Steve is presenting, and then afterwards as we move into the Q&A period. Following Steve's overview, we'll hear from panelist Brandon Dempsey. Brandon is founder and president of goBrandgo, and he will provide insight on how you as a business owner must maintain your focus on adding value for your customers now. Brandon, I'm really looking forward to your presentation, but before we hear from you, Steve, I'm turning it over to you.
Excellent. Marquita, thank you very much for all the work and effort that you're putting into assembling these various meetings and moderating for us. We really appreciate it. So around our office, we affectionately refer to this as Spring Break 2020. I couldn't find a good cartoon to lead with, but just wanted to let you know that, you know, as many of us have got a little bit of age on us, and it's our time to enjoy a little bit of a spring break. Just quickly, this was a little bit of a striking picture to get a sense of, you know, how much of our country has been affected by this. I think when you see it in a map layout like this, it really is striking to understand that it's not just us in our little communities, it's affecting everybody throughout the country as a whole. We're going to talk a little bit about the CARES Act, and I wanted to start with a simple review of the CARES Act and the $2.2 trillion that it involved. So there was $500 billion that was allocated towards distressed businesses, and $350 billion that was allocated specifically for small businesses under the PPP program. The IRS, the individual stimulus checks, that's total is $300 billion. There was another $250 billion in unemployment insurance, $150 billion for state and local governments, $140 billion for hospitals and healthcare. FEMA got $45 billion, and then the agricultural community got another $35 billion in aid. We're all, I think, hearing throughout the news media over the course of the last 48 hours that the SBA programs and the PPP or Paycheck Protection programs ran out of money. That really refers to the $350 billion and a portion of the $500 billion as well. So there are many other areas such as the unemployment insurance, the individual rebate checks, and so forth. All of those areas are still funded and flowing nicely. Just to give you another sense of scale, this shows you the volume that the SBA does in any given year. And you can see that for the last several years, the SBA has generated total loan volume of about $30 billion. So when you stop and think about this for a minute, when they're dispersing $349 billion in 14 days, they're actually dispersing more money in funding than the SBA has done in the last 14 years combined. So I think it's really quite amazing to think about the fact that the government was able to make adjustments and move that quickly. Also, we need to just touch on unemployment claims. So this will give you a sense of, you know, what our country's average unemployment claims look like. Right now, there are more than 22 million people that have filed unemployment claims, or in excess of 13% of our entire workforce in the United States. So unprecedented numbers that we've never seen before. I know there's a lot of frustration that we're hearing from our clients about not being able to get unemployment checks moving fast enough for their particular employees. And I think you just have to stop and breathe a minute and think in terms of, you know, what's happening throughout all of the systems. They're all, you know, virtually overwhelmed. So let me get into a couple of the facts. We're going to talk a little bit about some of the updates. And then we are really honored to have Brandon Dempsey with us today. And Brandon's got an incredible message, which I think is extremely timely for all of us as business owners. I'm very much looking forward to that. So quick update. This is just a quick copy of the press release that Secretary Mnuchin and Administrator Carranza came out with on Wednesday afternoon. Just, you know, letting everybody know that they were running out of funds. And I again just wanted to highlight that the SBA has processed more than 14 years worth of work in a total of 14 days. And I think the SBA often gets a bad rap for being relatively slow, but boy, I tell you, they win the award for being able to turn on a dime and make things happen this year. So let me give you a quick update. The first and most important thing that we want to talk about is we provided some information in our previous webinars about the use of PPP funds. And we got the updates last Friday after our webinar that issued some additional guidance on to lenders on how those funds are to be used and how they're to be forgiven. And they came out and said that the lenders must disperse those funds within 10 days of the application. And we're finding that that is happening. So if your lender has provided you with information that you are approved, you will be getting disbursements very quickly from your lender. However, please be aware that you must immediately after receipt of those funds begin to use those funds, because forgiveness is dependent upon you using those funds that you received during the 8-week period of time that follows the loan disbursement. So what does that mean practically? Even if the business is not open, the intent of the PPP program is for you as an employer to begin to pay your employees, even if there's not anything for them to do. So you need to make sure that you're flowing that money out to your people as quickly as possible. The federal government's going to reimburse you 100% for that. And again, you know, the intent of this was to keep people off of unemployment rolls for a period of time and provide the fastest means of getting money in individuals' hands, and that is typically through the private sector, through us as employers. So please be mindful of that. That's a clarification. That's different than we may have told you on some of the previous webinars, and we want to make sure and honor the commitment that we made to all of you as attendees that we would give you the most up-to-date information available. So let me move on to a couple of other updates. Been a lot of questions about the stimulus checks that are being issued by the IRS. They did begin hitting people's bank accounts this week. So the IRS, again, overperformed what they led everybody to believe would happen. They had told everybody in their releases a couple of weeks ago that they expected the money to begin flowing the week of May 4th, and it actually began flowing earlier this week. For those that might be on Social Security or other forms of disability payments that are not applicable for filing a tax return, this is a way the IRS has created a new website, a new landing page on their website called irs.gov/coronavirus/get-my-payments. So you can go on there and put in your information and make sure that the IRS has your direct deposit information to be able to send your stimulus check directly to your account. So that's new and went active, I believe, on Wednesday of this week. The other thing is, just to reiterate, there is a lapse in the appropriations. So what that means is that the SBA ran out of money for the EIDL loans and also for the PPP loans. So this is as Marquita so eloquently referred to this earlier, as a civics lesson. What we recommend to everybody listening to this webinar is take the time to reach out to your congressman and say, look, now is not the time for partisanship. Put that away and let's get this reappropriation funded and get this money moving back out to the small businesses in this country. Small businesses responsible for roughly 50% of the employment in this country, and is the fastest and most direct way of getting us back on the road to recovery. So finally, also mentioned to you a little bit last week about a new Main Street lending program that's coming, and this is going to be released by the Federal Reserve. We are expecting that in our webinar next week, we'll have many more details, but give you a little bit of information about what has come out so far this week. This is designed to be up to $1 million loan, which would be very similar to a traditional commercial loan for all businesses, typically having 3 employees or more. It can be combined with PPP, EIDL, and any other form. So there's not going to be any restriction about being able to do this. This, what's referred to as the Main Street Lending Program, is a new vehicle that the Federal Reserve is putting in place for banks and other qualified lenders, government guaranteed lenders, to be able to immediately go out to their customers and offer an additional business loan product. These loans will be at 4-year terms and at very low interest rates. We don't know exactly what the rate is going to be, but when you think in terms of the PPP loan is a 1% rate and the EIDL loan is a 3 3/4% rate, I would expect that these loans are also going to come in somewhere in the low single-digit margin. And there will be some restrictions, but the feedback that we're getting is that there will be very little restrictions. So these can be used for working capital and virtually all business expenses. So stay tuned, and next week we should have a lot more information on this additional loan program that our government is coming out with to help restart our economies. Okay, with that, that gives you a full update on everything we know to date. I am, again, honored and delighted to be able to introduce you to Brandon Dempsey, who owns goBrandgo. They are an incredible marketing agency who is really leading in terms of helping businesses pivot and move forward in these trying times. And Brandon, with that, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Awesome. Thanks, Steve. Super excited to be here with your audience today, and I'll make sure we get through this quick. So give you guys some stats. We are a marketing firm here in St. Louis, 17 full-time employees. Give you numbers, we'll do a little over 3 million this year, hopefully. Depends, obviously, with everything, how it's working out, but that's certainly where we're on pace. And the first week of the sending all of our employees to work from home, we had 25% of our revenue go out from under our feet for the next 3 months at least. It's been on pause. And so we definitely felt it that first week. It was oh crap, holy cow, things are changing fast. So as a company, the first thing we talked about internally was, all right, we've got to take care of the people, take care of our people. And there was a very big focus on, okay, let's have people home, let's figure out how we're gonna get them connected. And so it was all about, we've got to take care of our people first, because we've always been a people first, customer second, bottom line third focus, because we believe if we take care of our people will take care of our customers, and therefore our customers will take care of our bottom line. Well, right now, we're not even worried about the bottom line. We're worried about taking care of our people and taking care of our customers. And so what we said is, all right, we've got to change how we're going to market, and we've got to figure out how are we going to survive, and I believe how are we going to thrive through this market. So last week, I closed 2 deals, one for several $100,000 and then one other small deal. I've got 3 more proposals coming up that I deliver next week to companies in North Carolina, Minnesota, and one in Virginia. And we're selling. We I had a record week last Wednesday. We booked 6 new prospecting appointments, and we're finding that we can get prospects on the phone now because they're home and they're willing to take phone calls. And we're finding that we're able to get decisions quicker. And I'm talking to other marketing people who it's really interesting. In the marketing space, you've got some marketing companies that are just getting slashed and burned, and they're putting their heads down, and they're kind of putting their, like an ostrich, they're just putting their head down and saying, you know what, I'm going to wait until it all goes over. And you've got other firms that are getting aggressive and saying, hey, you know what, we can grow through this. And I do believe, Steve, that goBrandgo, I'm confident we are going to grow in the middle of this pandemic. And I want to share with you what some of the things that we're doing, plus the things that we're talking to clients about and what they're doing, and give you a framework for how we're positioning it. So the first is, I think you've got to look at our current customers and say, okay, what's the pain that they're having? So our first week, when we found out that 25% revenue is going to be deferred, we said, okay, what's the pain they're going through? And the pain they were going through was they don't know how to communicate in a crisis. They've got a bunch of people asking them questions. And so we as a team said, what can we build? What can we do to help customers with the pain that they're having? And so we immediately said, you know what, we can write sample email scripts. We can go research and find business continuity plans and pandemic response plans. We can start hosting webinars. And that's what we did. And so that first week, we rolled out a series of 4 webinars. We wrote all these sample email scripts. We wrote email updates. We wrote client communication stuff. We wrote communications for our clients to be able to send to their employees. And we just pushed all this stuff to our clients. We didn't ask them if they wanted it. We didn't tell them what it was going to cost. We didn't charge them. We just pushed it to them and said, hey, here are some resources for you. We hope this helps. And we got this amazing response back of, oh my gosh, thank you. I was trying to scramble to figure this out. And then we were able to take and pivot. So the first thing is, I think you've got to look at our current customers. Where are they experiencing pain right now? And there's an interesting story here in St. Louis. There's a pizzeria called Katie's Pizzeria. And I love what this owner, Katie, has done, because she took this Katie's Pizzeria, which is a sit-down restaurant, and she started making frozen pizzas, all right? They've never made frozen pizzas before, ever, right? But their customers have pain because they're trying to feed families. They can't go out. You've got a bunch of people who aren't accustomed to cooking, and a pizza obviously is an easy thing to reheat and feed the family. They have sold so many frozen pizzas that I got an email from her saying, hey, please don't order any pizzas for 2 more days. Like, we're taking 2 days off ordering. We can't fulfill the current orders that we have. So we're suspending ordering for the next 2 days while we get caught up. And yes, for those of you who have asked us if we will continue with the frozen pizzas after the pandemic, we will be. And that to me is just like, it's incredible. They pivoted and said, what are our customers paying right now? And what can we build with our current resources to be able to solve their pain? Frozen pizzas, who knew? So first we've got to look at current customers. What pain do they have, and what resources do we have to solve those pains? And it doesn't mean that they're calling you and telling you what their pain is. I mean, as your chart showed, Steve, the entire US is having pain. So I think you can assume everyone has pain right now. Second, you got to look at what net new customers, what pain are they having? So when we rolled out our webinar series, we started pushing out our resources, and we thought, you know what, let's run a cold campaign right now, a cold email campaign. Yes, we still do those. Let's run a cold email campaign, and let's start sharing some of our email scripts. Let's start sharing some of this webinar information. Let's just see, who knows, if one person gets to use it, that's awesome. Well, we started running this campaign, and that's how we picked up these companies that I mentioned in Virginia and in North Carolina. Like, that's off cold emails, because they got the information. They said, hey, our business is not being impacted that much. We're in that, one of them is in plastics, and a couple of them are in other different types of industries. And they said, we're actually not getting impacted. And in fact, this helps us with some other stuff, and we'd like to have a marketing conversation. So without even trying to market to them to sell them something, only trying to just give and not expecting anything in return, we're now converting those people into actual prospects. It's a bonus. We didn't know if it was going to work or not, but it's turning it. And I think that companies right now, there's a huge opportunity for you to get into, to get business, but you've got to earn business off a goodwill standpoint. If you're calling up and trying to sell somebody right now, it's probably not a good time to try and call somebody. And so people can feel that bated breath, I think, when you call them, when you're talking to them. But if you can reach out with just resources and offering to give, that's the genuineness that gets returned. Now, there's a strategy in Blue Ocean strategy. And Blue Ocean strategy, for those of you who don't know, it's about how do you figure out how to innovate your business. So Nintendo had an amazing blue ocean strategy when they came out with the Nintendo Wii, because they were the first gaming system that expanded a new market. So before it was only servicing mainly teenage boys, young teenage boys. And suddenly that Nintendo Wii came out and you had a stick, you could move around. Nursing homes were buying it and families were buying it. Church groups were buying it. And so they took, because of that product, and it opened up a whole new marketplace and got net new customers that they'd never received before. And in Blue Ocean Strategy, it talks about how companies have gone through crisis. For hundreds of years, companies have been going through crisis, okay? There are companies like Nintendo that actually started out making sewing machines, right? Yamaha originally got its business making pianos, and now they make motorsports. So there are companies that have had to face crisis and have had to innovate, and there are formulas for how to do this. So one of the formulas in Blue Ocean Strategy talks about looking at how do you eliminate, reduce, raise, or create. So how do you eliminate, reduce, raise, or create? And looking at your current offering. So an example would be, from a goBrandgo standpoint, we used to go to our clients and we drive to them. And there was always this drive time going to them. Well, we've now eliminated that drive time, which means we can service more clients, which means that we also have reduced the amount of hours and drive time that we've got, which means we've allowed our employees and said, hey, you don't fill this time with more work, fill this time with taking care of your kids, fill this time with taking care of your family and taking care of yourself. So in effect, we're able now to still have a similar workday, still be producing what we're producing, but we're just rearranging how the work is getting done. So I think looking at, okay, what can your business eliminate, reduce, raise, or create in terms of what other options your customers have? And that's going to give you an opportunity to say, okay, how do we need to change up our resources? And there's so many times that people say, well, but Brandon, like, this is what our company, like, this is how the industry works. You just don't get it. Our industry especially, you just don't get it. And I can tell you, when we've walked other clients through this methodology of the Blue Ocean Strategy, we show companies like Uber, the world's largest taxi company that doesn't own any taxis. We show companies like Airbnb, the world's largest hotel that doesn't own any hotels, right? Amazon, the world's largest merchant that doesn't have any stores. Well, now they've got a few cashless stores that are closed right now, but largely, right? Like, so there are ways, like, just because your industry hasn't made the change yet, doesn't mean that the change can't happen. And when it comes to a value standpoint, I think we've got to look at, okay, what's the pain that people are having? And the answers lie in the pain that they're having. And pain doesn't have to be physical or mental pain. It just be frustration. I want this certain thing to work a certain way. And because of the way the industry has largely been set up, it's possible that it's preventing you from servicing that client in a certain way. And so I think by looking at, okay, what's the pain they're having and how can we change what we're sending them? How can we pivot in how we're servicing these clients? It's going to allow and unlock opportunities for net new revenue. And if it doesn't unlock the opportunities for net new revenue now, think about what a great prospecting plan this is right now. Because your only goal, if you're in business right now, the only goal is to make sure your doors are open when all of this ends. If your doors aren't open when this pandemic ends, you're done, you're toast. There's no chance of you mounting any comeback whatsoever. But if your doors are open when the pandemic ends, you have a chance to mount a comeback. And there are going to be a lot of companies, there are a lot of leaders right now that are putting their heads down. I've talked to several different leaders who said, we've just furloughed our people, we've laid off our people, and we're just going to ride it out. We've got enough cash to pay the owners, and we're going to ride it out. And it's like, okay, that's a strategy, but when this comes back, you think you're going to be able to hire people really fast? You're going to be able to ramp back up? No, it's going to be the companies right now that are figuring how to provide value, or figuring how to pivot, that are going to be already light years ahead of you and claiming that market share. I guarantee you right now, there are marketing companies that are going out of business, and we're going to be strong coming out of this, and we're going to have a great opportunity to attract even more business because we're going to be setting ourselves up for it. So even if you're doing and giving and finding ways to solve people pain and not getting paid for it, similar to how we're rolling the webinar, similar to how we're building these sample scripts, similar to how we're just giving away a lot of work right now, we're building a prospect pool that, as we come out of, I think it's been called BC before Corona, DC during Corona, AC after Corona, right? We're planning for AC after Corona. And I can't wait to see AC after Corona and go into it with all of these new marketing assets and a huge pool of people that know our brand as a company that just showed up and gave and didn't expect anything back in return. And I think that that's just huge for us to be able to say, all right, how can we change this? How can we pivot and do good, right? We earn good by doing good, right? And I believe that we have to find ways to just be giving and making sure that we're giving out and doing good. There's a company down in Chesterfield Valley here in St. Louis, Missouri that makes heating equipment. It's called Cambridge Heat Solutions, or no, I'm sorry, Cambridge Air Solutions. It used to be Cambridge Heat. And they've switched their whole plant, and they're now making masks, and they're now making other protective shields and sending them out. We're hearing stories of small business that are changing and pivoting, and these stories are getting a tremendous amount of press, and they're getting press because they're doing good. And I just believe that right now, we all have an amazing opportunity right now to not put our heads in the sand and give up, but to lean into this crisis and be able to allow this crisis to define our business and show our teams and show our people that we can lead through crisis. Because as we come out of this, it's going to be the leaders, I think, that are going to win. And there's all these quotes I know that during good times, everybody can get rich, but it's in the down times where people can get wealthy, right? There are also quotes of never waste a good crisis. All of these things last because crisis happens every 10 to 15 years. Another crisis happens. This isn't a new phenomenon of a new crisis. We had 2008 crisis. We had the dot-com bubble, right? Like, go back in time, there have been crises every 10 to 15 years. While this is a first time of a global pandemic since 1918 that's really impacted it here, the idea of a crisis is nothing new. And it's the businesses that find ways of giving value that are going to win. So Steve, with that, I'm right at my time. I want to hand it back over to you.
Okay, well, Steve, I'll take over. Great message, Brandon. Now I'm looking at our Q&A board, and right now I'm not seeing questions coming in from the audience, but I do want to again encourage you to go ahead, type in your questions, and they can be questions for Steve or for Brian, and we will answer your questions. Now, we did have one come in earlier. Maddie asked, and this is targeted to you, Steve, has there been any change in PPP and shared work? It is my understanding last week that if we got a PPP loan, our employees could also participate in shared work program. Is that still true, or has there been a clarification on that?
Well, that is true, but you would want to use your PPP money first to pay your employees, and then use the shared work program immediately thereafter if your company is not back to 100%. So the way you would use the funds is, again, take the PPP money and use that for the first 8 weeks. And then during that 8-week period of time, make sure your company is positioned and that you've applied for and been approved for shared work, so that on week 9, you're in a position to be able to use shared work if you need it at that point. Great.
For Brandon, I'm going to actually pose a question for you and have you chat for a while, because I've got some others coming in for Steve right now. But I'm very familiar with your client that you used as an example earlier. And I'm in Illinois, and I have been a subscriber to her meal prep program. But we aren't in the pizza program, so tell her she's got huge opportunity for the Illinois zip codes for that pizza. It's the best pizza in the world. I love her product. So we have another question here from Gary. And he wants to know, what is the likelihood of getting additional appropriations for PPP out of Congress? That's an interesting topic there, Steve.
Yeah, my bet is that it's very strong. I think it's virtually guaranteed. I think there will be some additional monies coming. There was a breaking news story on the Wall Street Journal that I checked between webinars today about 2 o'clock, and it said that the Secretary Mnuchin and Minority Leader McCarty and Pelosi were huddled with Schumer trying to work out some of the details. So, I got my fingers crossed that they're going to come through, and I believe they will. Listen, I think the message that Brandon brought is so important. And just to give you the firsthand experience, I mean, Marquita and Terry and I never, in a million years would we have guessed that we'd be doing this 4 weeks ago. And here we are. And so I think we need to, as business owners and particularly small business. This is the competitive advantage that every small business has, is the ability to pivot and be able to move and seize opportunity when it comes your way. And Brandon, I'd love to have you elaborate on that, but I think your message is so timely.
Yeah, well, I think you've been a great example, right? You had 354 people register for these webinars. And if we were around the clock 5 weeks, well, shoot, you guys and I met and talked about marketing. And you talked about, hey, it'd be great to get a webinar series going. It'd be great to have like a podcast going or something like that. It just takes so much work. And here in a week or two, you mobilized a webinar series that's attracting more than 350 people every single week. That is marketing gold, right? You've stumbled upon and built something that your audience needs. Your audience has pain. They don't know about PPP and they have a lot of questions. They're getting bombarded with information, and you've created an easy way once a week to reset the expectation, say, okay, here are all the things that have happened this week. And it's amazing content. And then from there, you're also taking your natural gifts of being able to communicate in a way that's not overly technical, right? And not a bunch of bank information, nothing against bankers, but you break it down in a way that's everyday speak. It's the common man language, right? And so here you've taken your skill set, you've changed how you deliver it, and you've been forced, if you will, to deliver it in a virtual way, and your business is going to benefit from delivering it this virtual way because you're gaining traction with new people, you're getting new lists of new people to market to, you're exposing your brand to new markets, and you're setting your business up to be able to grow out of this. And I think that's just, you're a perfect case study of being forced to make a pivot, and you're actually going to grow and learn and become a better business because of it.
You know, another thing that's been interesting that's come out of this that I would encourage, you know, our attendees to do, you know, they're most likely business owners. Well, we've made it a point to reach out to as many people as we can to, you know, tell them that you need to contact your business owners or your clients and make sure that they're aware of these programs. Because in all likelihood, if your customers, you know, B2B are taking advantage of these programs, you know, they're gonna be in business on the backside of this, and they're still gonna be customers. So, you know, I have a client who has a large book of leases. They lease equipment out, and I encouraged him. Part of that is he has to borrow money to fund those leases. So one, you know, go to your bank and see if you can get a deferment on those loans. Most banks are giving a 90-day deferment on principal and interest just for asking. It doesn't hurt your credit, and it doesn't ding them as you being a bad loan. Then this particular customer can go to the over 100 people that he has leases with and make sure, you know, that they've applied for the programs, and two, you know, if they are feeling distressed, he may be able to give them a deferment on their lease. So I think you need to be creative in those ways also to make sure that your, you know, customers are applying for these programs and using the money the best way possible.
Well, and I think that talking about it is what generates opportunity, because I was 4 weeks ago, I was talking with a friend of mine, because we all, in addition to goBrandgo, my business partner and I buy 2, 4, 6 family houses that are, you know, kind of destroyed in the city. We rehab them ourselves. We've got a crew, and we rehab them, and then we rent them out. And so I was talking to a friend of mine about how our business was being impacted, and she asked if we had any issues with leases yet. And I said, no, not yet, but I imagine that they will be coming. And she said, well, the YMCA right now has got a program. They've got a grant. They've got $1 million here in St. Louis to help house women who have been misplaced or having issues making rent. Can I connect you with somebody? I'm like, oh my gosh, that would be awesome, right? So there are a lot of and I talked to somebody else, and they told me about a Missouri fund that's got a $50,000 loan product right now that the state of Missouri is rolling out. So instead of like burying my head and not going and talking to people, I'm going and talking to people about the pain we're having, about what we're working through, and other people are sharing those resources. So I think getting on webinars like this and going out and talking to customers and talking to other people, that's how you're going to uncover the opportunities you didn't know existed and were out there. Marquita?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I think one of the things, Brandon, that I'm hearing you say is the need has totally changed. And at some point, you need to just simply do a stop and a pause and say, okay, wait a minute. BC, before Corona, This is the need we were focused on. Now there is a totally different need, and how can I fulfill that in the same time looking forward to the after
Yep.
Corona? I heard you loud and clear there.
Yeah, and there's going to be a different need before Corona. There's a need during Corona, and there's going to be a separate need after Corona.
Brandon, you bring up another interesting point, and that's one of the things that I hope we're doing well at Innovative and consulting with our clients, which you can go to our webpage and register if you want to do that with us. Is it's not, the two main programs we're talking about is a Paycheck Prevention Program, PPP, and the Emergency Injury Disaster Loan, the EIDL. Those are kind of the two main programs, but there's several other programs that can work in conjunction with that, as well as, separate state and private grants and funding things that you're talking about. So, Steve, it was interesting. We'll have to send it out with the recording of the video, that 4 or 5 slide thing from a Vistage speaker on, basically 4 steps to follow. That'd be interesting. We'll get that to our participants today when we send out the recording of the webinar.
Okay.
But yeah, so it's just not one piece to look at. It's the SBA programs, the unemployment program, shared work, the SBA Express Bridge Loan, tax credits. I mean, there's just a menagerie. Even within the CARES Act, there's a thing I've been researching for a client about how travel agents, there's special money out there for them. So if you're feeling pain, look for the resources.
Okay. A couple more questions have come in. So Nancy has posed 2 questions. She's asking, does PPP money have to be spent, 75% of it have to be spent for payroll? Steve, that's for you.
Yeah, that's the guidance that's come out, is that you should be using at least 75% of the proceeds for payroll purposes. Yes.
Okay. And then her second question, we applied for EIDL over 2 weeks ago. We got a confirmation number, but still have not received an email from the SBA. Do we need to refile?
The SBA told us last week, some of these dates run together, but they told us last week that they were about 3 weeks out in response to EIDL. So they will receive something from the SBA. If they have a number, their loan has been logged and they will be contacted, and it'll be a live contact. Somebody will ring them on the phone and actually talk to them about their application. So I would say once you get beyond 3 weeks, at that point in time, I wouldn't expect anything before 3 weeks out. So I would say that's the point where you should start looking for that contact. The other thing that the SBA talked about this week is that there would be, I heard talk about them putting up some form of tracking mechanism for that as well. We haven't seen anything yet, but again, I just want to remind everybody that when you think about the gargantuan scope of what the SBA has accomplished in the last 14 days, I think we could give them as much grace as possible at this point and be patient. I think they're doing a marvelous job, and they will get to your application number.
Okay. So I'm taking a look at our Q&A queue, and it's dwindled. So I'm going to go ahead and begin to bring this webinar to a close a little early today. But what I would like to do before we close is give each of our 3 panelists an opportunity to make last comments. I'm going to start with Steve and Terry, and then Brandon, you will have the last word today. So Terry, I'll give it to you first.
Yeah, so, even though the funds have been depleted right now, everybody feels very strongly that there is going to be more money. So if you haven't applied yet, don't give up hope. Now's a good time to get your papers together. A lot of banks are still accepting applications because there's a bit of work that the bank has to do before they submit that to the SBA. So go ahead and get that in there. If you're having trouble finding a bank to take your application, by all means reach out to us. We have a long list of people that we could connect you with. And if you're interested in a 1-hour consultation, go to our website, innovativeba.com, click on the COVID tab, and there's a place there where you can register for a 1-hour consultation, if nothing else, just to make sure that you're using all of these programs appropriately and that you're getting all the money that could possibly be coming to you.
Okay, Steve, I'm going to turn it over to you, but before I do that, we did have another question pop in, and it's perfect for you. Trish is asking, do you have any guidance for unemployment for Missouri as an independent contractor? And I know independent contractors had a very specific experience in all of this. You might speak to that.
Yes, so as an independent contractor, you will be able to draw what's called pandemic unemployment assistance. And there is information about that on the Missouri unemployment website. They are not yet taking well, as of this morning, they may have turned it on this afternoon, but as of this morning, there was not a special application for that yet. There is some verbiage on that site just saying that that is coming very soon. So I would continue to monitor that on a daily basis as well.
Okay, and then Steve, for you, one more just popped in. In regards to the PPP forgiveness, it says that 25% can be used for lease payment. Is that limited to lease on real estate on the building, or can it be used for equipment and automobiles?
That's a good question, and I would encourage you to also talk to your banker about that and how they're going to interpret it, because at the end of the day, your banker is going to be the one that issues you forgiveness. But the way the law is written, the available use of funds for the Paycheck Protection Program is for all of your payroll costs, and there are a whole bunch of costs that are involved in payroll costs. So look at that definition. You can also use it to cover your utility expense. You can use it to cover rent or lease, and they really mean on real property there as I read it. And you can also use it to cover interest expense on your mortgage for your building, for your real property, or your interest expense on existing debt. So not the principal payments on existing debt, but just the interest portion of it. So I would encourage you to reach out to the banker that issued you the loan and get some specific guidance from them. And we, as I think I said earlier in the introduction, we are expecting that the SBA and the Department of Treasury will be issuing additional guidance, regarding interpretations of the rules, specifically on forgiveness aspect of it. There's very little out there right now on the forgiveness aspect of it. Most of it's in the implementation and the application process so far, but we think that that's coming.
Okay, thanks, Steve. Now, any last words from you?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think first off, Terry's 100% correct. So, the people that were paying attention and listening to webinars from us and others and investigating the various aid programs, those folks that acted quickly, obviously, are the ones that are reaping the benefits of those loans now. Those that have been late adopters, I don't think the window's closed for you. I think it's shut temporarily, and I think it will be open, but there's no time like right now to make sure that all your ducks are in an order. Make sure you've got your financial information in front of you and you're available to make application as quickly as possible. If your bank is not accepting applications at this time, please reach out to us. We will share our list with you, and we'd be delighted to engage with you and work through your various situations to help you isolate what are the right combination of aid programs that are available for you as a specific business owner. And this applies for independent contractors, sole proprietors, and businesses of virtually every size. The final thing I would say is, I don't think that, I think I've got probably the most gray hair in this group, and I've been around and seen a couple of these things. Brandon's
I got some right here.
You're joining the club, are you?
Yeah, it's happening.
I don't know, Steve. I might
daughters.
have you on that one.
My point is that these emergencies, these disaster situations, Brandon's 100% correct. Come around. Make sure you're prepared. Use this opportunity to do that. And I don't think we'll ever get back to exactly how it used to be. It's going to be somewhat different in the future. Really look at your business and take this counsel to heart. I think Brandon's hit the nail exactly on the head. Figure out what you need to do in your business to pivot, to take advantage of exactly the pain points that your customers are faced with. And if you don't know what they are, engage with your customers, even if they're not calling you, and find out what they are. And then act. Do not wait. Act. The survivors are going to be those that act. And we would like everybody in our audience to be not only a survivor, but people that learn how to thrive in this new environment. So we're very blessed that you've taken the time to be with us. We're very appreciative of that. And we are open to providing all the information we can, answering your questions, your emails, your calls. And the one ask that we would have for all of you as participants is please pay it forward. Don't assume that your neighbor knows this. Don't assume that the people in your investment clubs or your Bible study groups know all this information. Share this with them and make sure that they've got access to the resources. So pay it forward and get out there and be a survivor. So, and Brandon, thank you so much for your time today. You're so generous with that. We're very appreciative.
Thank you for
Okay,
the
and with that
opportunity.
said, Brandon, the floor is yours. You get the last word.
So the name of the game in business is always value, right? Like it's always, how are we providing value? And right now, the incumbents who have been providing value, there's a lot of times people don't switch providers because the people we're working with, man, they're just, it's okay. They're good enough, right? And good enough, I don't want to go through the pain of switching. And so I'd rather stay with the devil I know versus potentially the devil I don't, right? Well, now, because of this, there's a tremendous amount of disruption in industry. And now is the time where businesses are saying, you know what? Maybe that's not the person I want to stick with. Maybe that's not the vendor or the supplier. Like now is the time of opportunity being created where people are open to switching. And it's the companies that find ways to solve the problems that customers have been complaining about, right? They're now open to listening. They're now open to hearing. And there's a whole new slew of issues and challenges that they're having. And so it's the companies that find a way to solve the problems that people have are the companies that are finding ways to provide value. And that, I think, is what you've got to be able to do, because if you don't, you're toast. Your business, and if your business isn't toast during coronavirus, then somebody else is going to figure out how to provide that value, and your business might be toast after coronavirus. So find ways to provide value, focus on where that pain is, and know that people are willing to talk. Business is still getting done. Like it's still happening. It's changed, but it's still happening. And even if you're not trying to sell right now, now's the time to give. And it's those people who authentically show up just to give, like Steve and Terry and Marquita, they're going to see the lion's share of growth after coronavirus.
Brandon, thank you so much. And to all of our participants, as in the past, sometime tomorrow you'll receive an email. It will contain a link to our YouTube channel, and you will have access to a copy of this webinar, the transcript of the Q&A, and the slides that were used by Steve earlier. So with that said, I'm going to end the meeting. And again, thanks everyone for participating. And Brandon, thank you so much for joining us today. Bye-bye.
Have a good weekend, everyone.